Everyone, and welcome to the Directors Club podcast. I'm your host, Jim Laskowski. Oh, and wow, 2022 is here. I'm so excited. I'm remaking, redoing, and rebooting episodes from the past. And I guess you can call this Jane Campion Part 2, but I also like to think of it as a reimagining featuring different guests who will undoubtedly bring a whole different perspective. Not to mention, well, that last Jane Campion episode happened a decade ago when I had no idea what I was doing. But with me today, I recruited two truly special film enthusiasts, podcasters, writers, inspirations for me, to be honest. And first up, you might remember him from most recently the Matinee.Ca episode, and he's the host of his own long-running podcast, The Matinee, that I always look forward to. Welcome back, the delightful Mr. Ryan McNeil.
So you're the one who looks forward to it. I was always wondering who that was. I don't even look forward to it. I kid. It is a pleasure to be back here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
And making her Directors Club debut, one of my favorite film writers on the planet and creator of oldfilmsflickr.com, hashtag Noirvember, hashtag A Year with Women, hashtag Female Filmmaker Friday, and a movie trivia master. You can read her work in a variety of outlets. The great Marya Gates. Yay.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited. It's always fun to be on a new podcast.
Give it up, people.
Woo! So happy. Marya, since this is your first time on the show, I just want to ask, and I'm sure the listeners are curious, how did your love of film get started? How did this sort of just evolve into the incredible writing that you do currently? What really was the impetus for you to pursue film the way you do now?
I came out of the womb watching movies. No, I'm joking. But actually, my parents are, more my dad than my mom. My mom likes movies, but my dad was kind of nut like I was. And I think it partly stemmed from when he was a kid, he was sick a lot and he would stay home and watch old movies on whatever the old movie station was in the 60s in Los Angeles. And so he got kind of voracious. And then like my parents met at a movie, their first date was at a movie. It was Young Frankenstein. So thank you, Mel Brooks. And they both laughed. So that's how they knew that they were right for each other. And he always just brought movies home. He was a big fan of the VHS revolution because I grew up in the middle of nowhere and we didn't really have really good television. We did not get cable. Cable was not a thing up on a mountain. And, he joined Columbia House and, got the giant bunch of cassettes and we had Bill and Ted and my mom was really into international cinema. So she always would get Seven Samurai and Lawrence of Arabia, which is not, I guess, that international, but she was a stickler for aspect ratio because she took a class in grad school about film aspect ratios. And so she was really mad that VHSs, half of them didn't come in the right aspect ratio and she wouldn't buy a classic unless it was in the right aspect ratio. And so I grew up talking about these kind of things, aspect ratio, directors, cinematographers. When I was 10, I think I said I wanted to be a cinematographer. That did not happen, but I definitely thought about it for a while. And, my hometown theater only got one movie each week and it paid for 3 days. And so it was kind of a precious commodity seeing movies where I grew up. And thankfully we did have a video rental store and I was probably their best customer and they probably went out of business because I graduated and left. They did kick around for another 10 years or so. I think Netflix is what killed them. But, that's just sort of how it was, just always was. And it got easier and easier to watch more and more movies as the internet, kind of grew, and first through maybe illicit means. And then now just the the amount of streaming options that have come out in the last 5 years boggles my mind. I have all these spreadsheets of movies I try to watch, and I never get to any of them because new movies show up and it's overwhelming. But that's, I guess, the short version.
Yeah, I know the first time I heard you was on a favorite podcast of mine called Increment Vice.
Oh, yes.
And because I'm kind of obsessed with all things Inherent Vice, and the fact that there was like, what, a 45 episode show or more.
Travis's podcast. He's a wild man.
No kidding. I just ate that up, though. It gave me a greater appreciation for that film, even though I kind of loved it the second time I saw it. The first time I was like, as I think most people have that reaction. And a lot of people don't love it the way I do. And I understand that. But, it's interesting because I've just revised my favorite directors list, because my two favorites have mainly been Paul Thomas Anderson and David Lynch. But now I think number 3 is Jane Campion.
Wow.
Yeah.
That sounds right.
I really
approved
a lot watching her work, including some of her early films, her short films and everything. But and I also want to acknowledge that the two of you recorded an episode on the Matinee.Ca recently on The Power of the Dog. So that I'm obviously linking in the show notes so everybody can hear, because it's very different than what Blank Check does. And oddly enough, they're covering Jane Campion right now. They go through each individual film episode by episode. But for my show, we kind of just binge on everything and talk about as much as we want, as much as we can. And for Jane Campion, gosh, it's hard to just be like, well, in the last episode, I did talk a lot about the piano and in the cut, so maybe I won't, give lengthy monologues or anything on those films. I will share my thoughts, of course, but I will leave that to the two of you to really highlight more than I would, because I've already shared a lot of thoughts on both of those films. Granted, a decade ago, so those thoughts have probably changed a little. But, I'm just beyond stoked.
You both live in areas of the country where basketball is very important. So I'm going to use a basketball metaphor on this.
Go for it.
Like there's a lot of teams where it's just the secret of their success is just pass LeBron the ball and get the hell out of the way, or pass Jordan the ball and get the hell out of the way. That is basically my whole strategy today. I'm just going to keep passing Marya the ball and just clearing the side, because it's just, when you have LeBron on your team, why not just get the heck out of the way and watch them do what they do so very well.
No kidding.
The Power of the Dog episode that we recorded. It's one of my favorite episodes that I've done in a while, and it's all Marya. I'm able to kind of formulate what I want to ask her about, but generally speaking, it's just like, so Marya, teach me about this because you're so much smarter than me.
Well, yeah, and there are a couple of titles that I'm not like as high on, and I think Marya, in that episode, you mentioned that you do have a love for pretty much everything.
Yeah, she and David Lynch are my two favorite directors. I could watch anything they do over and over and be happy, pretty much.
Yeah, understandable. But we'll get to like kind of in the middle. I think most people, the consensus would say these two films that I'm not quite as high up on. A lot of people feel the same, or they at least have issues with them. So I would definitely want to hear your perspective on those films. But before we talk about the director, there's another fun segment that we do here on the show, and it's simply called, What Else Have We Watched Recently? And we kind of just bring up one title we want to highlight each. And, it could just be anything or something recent. I'm definitely going to be talking about a Sundance title in particular. But that's the thing, too, is like I didn't see nearly as much as most people have, because I didn't get any press credentials or anything fancy. But Well, yeah, we'll get to that, but I'd rather start with Ryan this time. Let's see what you want to talk about for this segment. If there's anything that you saw recently that is not related to Ms. Campion.
I was going to say, aside from a whole lot of Jade Campion, like my whole Letterboxd feed lately has been like all Campion all the time. If anybody like was looking at it, I'm sure they could tell that I was prepping for a podcast. One thing I watched last night, because I finally got done with all my homework, is Criterion Channel has a whole subsection for Technicolor. Where you can find stuff like Black Narcissus and the Red Shoes and Blight Spirit and all kinds of, the normal Technicolor go-tos that are kind of like seen as like the totems of what that color quality could do in film. One that was there that I hadn't seen that I was curious about for several reasons, and I bet $5 Mariah's seen this, is Niagara.
Oh, yes. Yeah, not only have I seen it, I saw it on the big screen about 10 years ago.
Yeah, you've written thesis papers on it, I'm sure.
It's so good.
Yeah. Henry Hathaway, 1953, Marilyn Monroe, Joseph Cotton. What I really love about like any platform, I don't care like how populous or how niche it is I love it when they curate collections and they highlight things like Technicolor or directors of color or a movement out of a country like Czech New Wave or something like that. So having all this content, it's like drinking out of the fire hose. So having a little bit of direction sometimes is really, really valuable. And yeah, looking through all the Technicolor films, this was like the one that jumped out that I hadn't seen, which I was interested in because it's one of the fewer films where Marilyn Monroe is more dramatic. She tended to play things more comedic and more light. It's really cool to see her doing something that's heavier. Joseph Cotton doing what Joseph Cotton does. The whole thing set in Niagara Falls back when that was like a destination rather than just kind of a place people end up. It's trashy. It's beautiful. It's engaging. It's about these two couples that happen to be in the same Niagara motel. One celebrating their honeymoon. The other are just happen to be there. It's like a getaway, and they both get caught up in the second couple, the getaway couple that's played by Joseph Cotton and Marilyn Monroe. This whole illicit affair that's going on that just gets darker and darker as the film goes on. And it's gorgeous and it's trashy and it's so magnificent inside of 90 minutes.
Yeah, it's a wonderfully lurid film. And
for sure.
Some of the best reds, I think, the Technicolor ever produced outside of the Red Shoes. Yeah.
Yeah. If you want to see the color magenta pop on screen and, for bonus points, have it wrapped around Marilyn Monroe, watch this movie.
Yeah, and I'm seeing that it's written by, or at least co-written by Charles Brackett. And I'm like, Oh my gosh, I need to see this because obviously he worked with one of my favorites, Billy Wilder, on several occasions. I'm not too familiar with Henry Hathaway, the director. I guess he was best known as a Western director. I am a fan of Randolph Scott, so I need to see more of his work.
He worked at Fox for quite a bit in the 40s and 50s and did another of my favorite noirs called with Lucille Ball called The Dark Corner. That has maybe my favorite sound design in any film noir.
Ooh.
Yes.
My gosh.
You're speaking my language, woman.
Yeah. Tell me about it. I'm so excited. I'm gonna have to catch up with both of these, maybe even tonight, because I've been dipping into that Criterion channel more and more and more, and just like, I wish I didn't have a day job. I just want to stay home and watch everything on the Criterion channel. Good Lord. There's so much to catch up with there that I'm so excited about. So yeah, Mariah, I know that you've been busy binging on Sundance titles. Is there anything you wanted to bring up from that experience?
Yeah, I ended up watching 46 feature films.
Oh my Lord.
Ooh.
Which is about 55% of what was programmed, which is insane. I will say that the only reason that was humanly possible is I was covering several for a couple of outlets and I got early screeners. If I hadn't done that, I would not have been able to see that many.
And you were doing it from home.
And I was doing it from home, so I didn't have to run from theater to theater, which was really great. Although my boyfriend made me stop a few times. He was like, "We're gonna go eat. You need to leave your room." I'm like, "Fine." Okay,
Did you have a green vegetable?
Well, yes,
good.
I did.
All right.
A few times.
Nice.
I saw the sun a couple times, but if it were up to me, I would have seen every single feature. But that's probably healthier that I didn't. But my favorite of all of them was actually the first one I screened, and it was so good. I texted him and I was like, I don't know that anything at the fest is going to top this. I can't believe I started with this movie. And a few things came close, but this really was like made for me. It's a Finnish coming of age film. The English title is called Girl Picture, but the Finnish title is actually Girls, Girls, Girls. And it makes sense if you watch it. I think the Finnish title is much better. She's trying to reclaim the idea of girls, girls, girls. And it's 3 different girls sort of over 3 different weekends, 2 of which fall in love, one of which is just trying to find a man or a boy who will actually like give her sexual pleasure as opposed to, just lying there. And it reminded me a lot of the girl side of Fast Times at Ridgemont High, which obviously Cameron Crowe wrote that, but Amy Heckerling added a lot of her own experience as a girl to the girls in Fast Times, and this felt that true and honest about like burgeoning sexuality and the heightened emotions and the gossip of being a teenage girl. And I would put it up there with like Virgin Suicides in terms of like best depictions of teenage girls. It's a comedy, like more of a comedy than Virgin Suicide. So like just in terms of raw emotions though. And it's beautifully shot and it makes you want to go to Finland. Like I was like, is Finland really like this? Or is this like just the best time in Finland? I don't know. But all the characters felt rich and real and the emotions felt real. And it reminded me of being a teenage girl again, in the good parts of it, not the bad parts of it. Cause it's one of those movies that's like, here's the good stuff. It's a little bit toe dips into the bad stuff, but I just really loved it. It was pink and gauzy and really fit the title and just buoyant. I loved it.
Well, that sounds great. Yeah.
No kidding.
There's a lot to look forward to, but yeah, I did opt just to watch a few Sundance titles I knew were getting buzz, and unfortunately, one of those wasn't Kogonada's After Yang, which I know everybody is saying was a highlight of the festival. And good Lord, my love of Columbus is pretty powerful. I often think about that movie and the fact that I really don't get that excited about architecture, and that movie made me get excited about architecture. But yeah, I didn't see that yet. And there's a film that was just acquired by Shudder called Speak No Evil. And
that one's so good.
But it's hard to talk about, right? Like,
yeah, you can't talk about it.
No, I know. We can't go into too much detail because you don't want to spoil anything. And it's one of those that you should just go in completely cold. But I it felt to me like a little bit of Michael Haneke and a little Lars von Trier. And maybe it's like their own take on force majeure or something like that. It
made me so nervous that I honestly wanted to vomit. And then the last 20 minutes happened and I was like, how am I still breathing? How am I still breathing? It was so good. And I'm not usually a big horror person. Mm-hmm. This might even make my end of the year list. I liked it that much. Like, we'll see, but I need to revisit it when it hits Shudder. But I watched it really late at night too. And I was like, I can't sleep now. Oh God.
I know, right? And it's like, any I think scenarios with awkward get-togethers or dinner parties really get to me and make me anxious.
Yeah, it would be a great double feature with like The Invitation.
Yeah,
you
totally.
would never go to anyone's house ever again.
Yeah, and another quick title that I'm going to recommend, but I was also a little surprised by just the high praise and acclaim, is the second film from Cooper Raiff, I think, Cha-Cha Real Smooth, which is kind of a terrible title.
Didn't that get bought by Apple?
Yeah, for a lot of money.
Right.
A lot of money.
Yeah, and it's a heartwarming sort of crowd pleaser, and I just wasn't like over the moon about it the way some people seem to be.
I wasn't either. We Robert and I watched it together, and when it was over, we were like, "That's it."
Yeah, that's kind of how I felt.
It's pleasant. It really is pleasant. It's like if you take a Xanax or something. But I don't watch movies in order to be calmed. So.
Yeah, I think Dakota Johnson just keeps getting better and better with every film that she's in, and there's that lovely mother-daughter relationship that I think I would have been more interested in just following them than Cooper's character, because he's just kind of a drunk, goofy dude at times. But I mean, like, the movie has its heart in the right place, so I'm not like dismissing it at all.
Yeah, I would agree. I feel like I think the writer, director, actor is 23, and it feels like a movie that you would make at 23 if you're a nice guy, but you don't necessarily have wisdom yet.
Right.
That's what it felt like to me.
And that's
he's
how
more naive than he thinks he is.
And that's how his debut felt for me. Shithouse, which is another terrible title. But I
to market these days.
Yeah, I do like his writing, and I think he's, a likable presence. So I'm curious to see where he goes. But yeah, people are putting this like up there with Coda from last year, which, I think was way more effective, especially on an emotional level.
It is nice to see that the Sundance machine is still churning out the hype, that it hasn't slowed down one bit after all these years.
Even virtual. And the same goes for like films that are harder to comprehend. They got, they were dismissed after the premiere. I'm talking about Nanny. And then more people saw Nanny and were like, wait a minute, this is really good. What were those people that first saw it thinking? And obviously then it won big, but it was exactly the same kind of hype machine as in Sundance, where the people who get first access to films aren't necessarily the ones you should listen to. You should wait until the second screening happens and see what the better consensus is.
Festival goggles are a thing. That's all I'm saying.
It's a thing, even if you're at your house with your cat.
Yep.
Yeah. And the last one I'll talk about quickly here is Brainwashed, which is a documentary. Did you see this?
No, Mariah? I missed that one. It's the Nina Menkes.
Yeah, I'm a little torn on it, but I still think it's really important to watch at some point. It's based on a talk that she gave. I think it's called Sex and Power, the Visual Language of Cinema. And of course, it's mainly about the male gaze and how it's infused itself into so many movies, obviously due to it being a male-dominated industry. But she, talks about how the cinematic language kind of places the cisgender heterosexual male in the subjective position as the voyeur and places the woman in the objectified position, the one being viewed, and kind of brings up like just how this is done through lighting and framing. But it's framed, the documentary itself is framed like a TED Talk, which that's kind of like, I don't know, that structure didn't necessarily work in terms of execution. I just thought, I mean, you probably could watch this as a TED Talk, but at the same time, it brings up some examples that really make you recontextualize certain scenes from certain films. And I don't want to go through like a laundry list of all the movies she brings up, but there's an interesting moment involving Rosanna Arquette's reaction to a scene in one of my very favorite movies, After Hours, where her dead character is embraced by the camera in this kind of creepy sexual manner. And even she points that out, that now she looks at that shot differently than when she was filming it. So there's moments like that really, like hit you hard and also make you go back and think about the way the camera is placed and why it's like that. And the majority of cinematographers are male. And no one's exempt. Even a couple of women, a couple of female filmmakers are talked about a little bit, including most recently Titane. I still don't know how to say it.
I had heard about that, and I feel like that's part of why I didn't want to watch it. Is I think by one person saying these other women are framing because they're doing the male gaze without realizing it takes away the agency of those women and the women who shot those movies with those women. I think there's some subversion that a lot of women do of the male gaze, and I think Titan is an example of that.
I agree.
Because it's such a queer film, and it's shot like you're luridly, but it's not like consuming the same way. And I like Nina Menkes a lot, but I do think that she has a very distinct like idea of what is feminist that isn't open to other women's interpretations of what is feminist. And so it always is difficult when one person says they have the key, you know what I mean? When art is, there's no one person that has the key to how to interpret art. But if you only have one documentary talking about this, then suddenly everyone thinks this is the only, way to look at things, and it gets rough. And we just need more perspectives, I think is kind of my take.
I completely agree. But at the same time, it gives me a lot of food for thought in terms of like, the way, like Kathy Moriarty's character is introduced in Raging Bull. There's like,
I do think that Raging Bull is really disgusting. Actually, the first time I watched it, I loved it. And the second time I watched it, I was like, what?
Yeah. There are a few films that have fallen in my eyes as hard and as fast as Raging Bull.
Yeah, it's rough. But to that point, though, I think what is a good thing about this documentary is it'll make people rewatch movies.
Yes.
With a different
perspective. And I do think that is important, whether all of her points are cogent or not. I am a absolute fanatic for rewatching. Rewatching at different ages, rewatching when you've talked to somebody about, the great example. When I saw The Souvenir, I didn't particularly care for it. And then I talked to my friend who loved it, and she explained why it meant so much to her. And then I rewatched it and I was like, I can see what she saw in this now. I still don't, it's still not for me, but I get the other perspectives. And I do think that rewatching films can be really powerful.
Yeah, and that's probably why I do. And it's probably why, like, even just to kickstart this year on my show, I want to go back and watch movies or talk about directors that have been already covered on the show, because I've changed in the past decade.
Yeah. I would imagine Jane Campion, I feel like when Bright Star came out, was kind of waning. People were like, wait, who? And in the last 10 years, 12 years since that film, people have put her back on the like best directors ever list. And I'm so grateful because she is.
Have we ever, Mariah, we talked about this on my show. Did we ever figure out why she took the break?
I think she couldn't get funding mostly. And she was making these TV shows, and because she could get the funding to do TV, and she was co-directing all of those. So there was, it's the same reason that David Lynch stopped making movies. He and John Waters, like, they have very uncompromising visions, and they know how much money it's going to take to make what they want to make, and they're not going to make anything for less.
No, they're not going to half-ass it.
Right.
No.
Yeah. And I think with Top of the Lake, she was able to get, because they were filmed in Australia, and then she had, co-writer and directors who were also Australian. It's easier to get funding for a couple of people than one person's vision, I think.
Yeah.
Wow, we just transitioned beautifully. That was great.
At that.
I'm impressed. Mariah, you should just host the show. But no, I think, we'll just transition into the director of the episode. Now most of the files are familiar with the name Jane Campion, and we've, like I mentioned, covered her in the past, but I wanted to revisit her work due to my sort of instant unabashed love for her latest film, The Power of the Dog, which is definitely a front runner to win Best Picture. But maybe I shouldn't say that. I just got to be careful. But at the same time,
no-hitter. It's like a no-hitter. Come on. Don't talk to the pitcher.
Right. And I saw Bright Star for the first time, and I had to make sure I didn't start sobbing in front of my mom.
That's literally my reaction. I had to leave the house. I wouldn't cry in front of my mom. I feel it.
Yeah, I was like, holy crap. I was not expecting that kind of response. But at the same time, no, her films genuinely move me. Oddly, my two favorite films of 2021 were Power of the Dog and Petite Maman. And that really goes to say that, like, I'm more engaged with the mood, the emotional level. Like, they're speaking to me on some sort of deeper level rather than like, oh, that was cool. Or, there's a mood piece, and they're built on these blueprints of like just pure interior emotion rather than thinking about plot beats or story devices, or even having some things play out in this kind of logical A to B to C fashion. I mean, I know when I first talked about her, I didn't necessarily like say, "Oh, she's not the greatest storyteller," because she's so focused on mood and atmosphere and character. But I think that all creates and enhances her storytelling capabilities is when she does focus on those things, and she has way more empathy for her characters. So that alone just gets the Jim seal of approval in general for all of her work. Like, there's never a moment where I'm like thinking she's not, like, even background characters get kind of their own moment, even if they're just, like cleaning a classroom. A janitor will suddenly get a moment. And I think that I just really respond to that. And obviously, the way she portrays passion and desire is just unparalleled to just about any director out there. I kind of feel like the sensuality of everything going on. So, yeah, I mean, like, she makes films on her own terms, and obviously she gives voice to female characters and their need for self-actualization. And I just can't get over how moved I get by watching all of her work, including her early work. So it's just, she has an incredible body of work. It's just amazing to me. So I'm really excited to talk further. Marya, what was your first experience seeing a Jane Campion film? Was it Bright Star, or did you go early on to see something else?
It was The Piano, and I didn't see it when it came out, and I actually didn't see it till I was in college because my mom saw it when it came out, and she, I guess, thought I couldn't handle full frontal male nudity. And when I did finally see it, I was like, Mom, I watched Trainspotting, right? Like, Trainspotting has that and a baby crawling on the wall,
Yeah.
Comparatively, I should have seen Piano much earlier than. Oh, you know what? I made a mistake there. I forgot when I was. But yeah, my mom didn't want me to see it because of Harvey Keitel's penis. But I remember now. The first Jane Campion I saw was The Portrait of a Lady, because when I was 9 or 10, I was really obsessed with John Malkovich. And this was rated PG.
All? I mean,
yes, I mean, right?
As one should be.
Unfortunately, it was because I saw In the Line of Fire, and I took the wrong things from his creepy character in that. But he plays a lot of creeps, and I love it. So I rented that because it was rated PG, and my mom couldn't stop me. And that should not be rated PG. It's rated PG because there's no nudity and there's no like language. But that is an emotionally complex film, and when I was 9, I was not prepared. And I recently rewatched it for the first time because the Academy Theater showed it. I hadn't seen it in, like 25 years. And I was like, holy shit, I should not have watched this at 9. I didn't understand anything that was happening. Fantastic movie. But then I didn't see another one until I saw The Piano in college. And I was like, why did she not let me see this as a kid? This is dumb. This movie is so good. And then from there, I think the third one I saw was Bright Star. Which I hadn't seen in theaters until a couple of weeks ago when the Academy showed it, and I finally got to die a happy death in the theater. But and then from there, I just caught up on the rest over the next, I guess from The Piano. I was 2006 when I rented that. So for the last. How many years is that? 16 years. I just slowly caught up on all the others, and most of her shorts. When I was in grad school, I was always watching shorts, so I watched a lot of her shorts. And I don't know. She's rarely disappointed me. There's only one of her features that I feel like I need to revisit because I wasn't on board. but I feel like if I watched it again, I'd probably like it better.
I'll be interested to hear what that is. But Ryan, what was your first experience seeing Jane Campion, and what was your thoughts initially?
My first experience with it would have been the piano when I was about 18 or so. And I really got to confess that I think that was a movie that I like half watched, that I put on, and I was like moving about the room, because it didn't affect me near as much as it did the subsequent times that I've watched it, which is to say something of the changing taste of a person as they get older, and also just kind of my changing taste in film. Although at the time I saw it, 18, 19, I was into that kind of like prestige type picture. Maybe not as much as I am now. I'm a lot more interested now in the classic stories and the emotion that's involved in them. They're very subdued. They're very, very subdued. And for a while, it took me a long time to actually get into that mindset of a story, of understanding like the emotional charge of a touch, which I own. I cop to that. But I'm there now. So yay. The first of hers that I actually saw proper and fully engaged in, oddly enough, was In the Cut in 2003. I saw that came to TIFF that year, and that was one of my selections for TIFF that year, and I got to watch her introduce it, and watch that craziness unfold, and not really know what I was going to be getting myself into. And I thought, I remember enjoying the heck out of it, but then I remember just being so confused when I came away from it and it was just getting slammed like no tomorrow. It's been really fascinating and wonderful to watch this turnaround on In the Cut and see it kind of getting its flowers now, almost 20 years later, of like it's now regarded as this misunderstood piece of cinema that's really kind of fantastic. But that was my first proper introduction to her, with like full attention and full engagement, and then all the other dominoes fell in after that.
I remember when that came out, I really wanted to see it because I love Meg Ryan, and it did not come to my hometown theater. And I think it played in Sacramento, and I was there for a doctor's appointment. And I remember cutting out the ad for it out of the paper. I still have the advertisement I cut out with like Meg Ryan's face and staring at the camera or whatever. But I think my dad wouldn't take me. He was like, so we didn't.
Probably a good idea.
Yeah. So we didn't see it. I think my dad and I have seen some awkward things together, but I feel like that probably would have pushed him over the edge. But, and then when I finally did get to see it, I was like, I knew I was going to love this. I knew I was going to love it. It's just been really great the last probably 2 years, really, that mostly women have have been coming in and saying like, you guys are dumb. Like you were dumb then, you're dumb now. And what really sucks is not only did it sort of torpedo Campion, she only got one other film out after that, it completely torpedoed Meg Ryan.
Oh, she was done. It's so weird to see her in something like that. I mean, it's strange to watch her and Ruffalo in that movie and see like one star basically crashing to earth and the other one start taking the ascent.
Yeah, and it's just shows you how it was all built on sexism, because he can be this like sexy psychotic cop and have a 20-year career, and she finally, America's Sweetheart, like shows her tits, and it's like, no movies for you. It's like, what?
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense at all.
It really sucks.
Because it's a great performance from her. It truly is. And we're not going to go into long, drawn out reviews of every single film, especially since, like I mentioned, I've covered a couple of them at length, but we'll sort of start from the beginning. I've got to say, like her short films, I thought were great. I know it was more of a collaboration, but Passionless Moments is this short film that she co-directed and collaborated on. I believe it was with her partner at the time. And it reminded me a little bit of the work of Roy Andersson, kind of, by way of like Buñuel. And it's like, it's capturing these like rather mundane moments that people experience and giving them kind of this more grace and emphasis as being their own little works of art that, really sort of showcases her sense of humor, but also just her interest in details and the way people live when they're alone or thinking their thoughts. I wouldn't say I wouldn't say it's an essential work, but I kind of enjoyed just sort of the experimentation that she brought to that film. And certainly her other short films are great.
It's interesting too that she sort of co-created that with I think it's Gerard Lee, who obviously she co-created Top of the Lake with, and you can see how they're really in sync in the ways that very small moments that people might otherwise think are not cinematic are completely filled with intense emotional weight.
Mm-hmm. And that's her whole jam, isn't it?
Yeah, and you see it in this film
time and again in her films. She has an incredible way of giving so much meaning to these little moments.
Yes, and Peel, which is the one that I think both Peel and Passionate Moments played at Cannes. Peel is the one I saw in grad school and was like, "Wait a minute, this is so good. How is this so good?" She's a genius.
And A Girl's Own Story, that was amazing too. And the song that ends that, I can't find it anywhere, but I was like, holy crap, this is totally my jam. Because it's kind of synthy. And I think Alex Proyas, he might have written the music for that song. And it's pretty haunting.
And it was the original film that Campion and Kidman were going to make together.
Right.
And yeah, it started their relationship, and Kidman, backed out when she found out what the real plot was.
Mm-hmm. How old would she have been at the time?
Teenager, 14 or 15, I think. And it'd be a hot minute before they made a movie together. But she definitely, at least early Kidman, has a very similar vibe in terms of her characters always have this undercurrent of emotional violence, the same way that Campion loves to dissect emotional violence. And I would have been interesting to see her as a teenager in a movie like this, but
yeah, I know she was in that movie Flirting. Flirting. I remember that pretty well. I think I got to cover that soon, if not this year, for my 1992 retrospective podcast that I do. I can't remember what year that came out, but I want to say it's this year or the next year. But Sweetie is a really great film. It started with the idea for her to sort of showcase relationships that don't work, or relationships where they feel love and don't necessarily want to be intimate anymore. And it's just a really darkly comedic story about two sisters who have never really properly addressed their strained relationship with each other or their toxic family. And she's definitely interested in family dynamics and communication breakdowns throughout all of her work. It reminds me of the ones that we get to see with the family in Holy Smoke at times, which I think are some of the strongest parts of that film.
I also do want to, before we get too far into Sweetie, I want to point out people should watch Two Friends if they can. It's counted as a TV movie, quote unquote, because it aired on Australian television, but it's not a TV movie. It played at Cannes.
I was a little cold on that one. Maybe it was just because it was the last one of hers I watched, and I took things in order.
I love it so much. It as someone who had a very close female friendship that was explosive.
Right.
It really, she knows her name was Sadie, and we had an explosive friendship. And I feel like Two Friends was one of the first movies I ever saw that really tapped into how violent girls can be towards each other, and then patch it, have the strength to patch it. It's a beautiful movie. And it's available, I think, from Milestone Films. So
it's that one's on Criterion as well.
On Criterion Channel.
That's where I watched that. I think it's just because because I watched it's on me. I watched it out of order, and I think I actually watched it in between Power of the Dog and Bright Star. So I'm I kind of jammed it in between these two masterpieces of technique.
Yeah, that'll do it. That'll do it.
It was a bad curation on my part.
It's clearly a first film. It very much is. But you see the kernels of the kind of stuff that she, especially that she starts doing better in Sweetie, where in Sweetie, instead of friends, it's the sisters that are having the same sort of charged relationship. Let's put it that way. The Sweetie's also the first film of hers, I believe, to have full frontal male nudity, something that she has in almost every one of her films. So bless.
Yeah, she's like, I think she's quoted as saying strip more, act less, or something like that.
Yeah, there's a great interview she did in the early 90s. I'm forgetting, maybe Bomb magazine or one of those, like feminist magazines for the 90s, talking about why she always has full frontal male nudity in her films. And it's very like combative in that she's called a misandrist a lot. Like she hates men, but I don't think if you hate men that much, you would have so much full frontal male nudity. I think she's just honest about how shitty men can be, and men don't like to see that. Yeah. At least they didn't in that part. They aren't used to it. You weren't used to seeing what women see in men.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind a 4K release of this one because it's so gorgeous. I mean, that's the thing I always walk away from any of her films. Is just they're so beautifully shot, and just like the attention to detail, whether if it's like circling a teacup or walking between the cracks in the sidewalk, or just
the way those coins hit the ground in the parking garage. Like
exactly
right out of the gate, like with Sweetie, you really do get an idea of her eye and what she's going to get out of her cinematographers. It's just gorgeous in all kinds of corners where films kind of often just don't bother to be gorgeous.
Yeah, there's a shot where she kind of pans over the ceramic knicknacks.
Yeah.
That I love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because the ceramic knickknacks come back in a big way later. Yeah. And it's one of the first where she uses like the gauziness of curtains in a really interesting way.
Sure.
Just such a it's such a soft, gauzy movie, how it's shot, but it's such an angry movie at the same time. I love that tension.
Yeah, there's definitely that tension throughout. And it's, it's about people who are broken and who are trying to deal with that brokenness in ways that, that they think are going to be helpful, but it unintentionally ends up hurting those around them. And I think a lot of those themes are, focused on throughout a lot of her work. And I think a lot of her films early on were shot by Sally Bongers, and just that choice alone to have her shoot these films, I think automatically makes those choices more interesting in terms of what to focus on. I go back to this one once in a while and kind of love it more and more, because first time I saw it, I was like, this is kind of like like more of a surreal early 90s, like almost like Hal Hartley movie or something, because of the way people interact with one another isn't necessarily grounded in realism at times. And that's something you sort of have to acclimate yourself to as you're watching her work. And then she'll have something like the tree sequence there.
Yeah.
And you're just like, whoa.
The chopping of the tomatoes. I really love that sequence. Yeah. This is a movie I've interviewed a lot of female directors, and two movies that come up a lot are this and The Piano. But when people bring up Sweetie, they mostly bring up how rare it was if you saw this in 1989 and maybe you were a teenager in your early 20s and you were a woman and you thought about making movies. This was one of those first times where a lot of women saw women represented how they knew them, angry and sexual and a little destructive, and yet with empathy for that. If you saw a destructive woman before this, it was like Glenn Close, boiling a rabbit or something. And you didn't really get to see how women can be destructive and gentle at the same time. And I think a lot of women saw this movie and said, wow, I think I can make a movie now.
A lot of other movies like this, like you in the audience would be predisposed not to like Dawn at all. Like you would have no, empathy for this kind of destructive, not even destructive in that way, but this real disruptive is the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
There's a real disruptive force in her family and in her circle. Like you would just look at this person, you'd be like, I can't deal. But this movie really frames her in this way of saying, you know, there is still a lot of warmth to her. There is still a lot to care for. And just, this is not a piece of garbage. This is not somebody just to cut off and cut ties. There is a lot to this person, and that the care that Campion brings to telling her story is really exceptional.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
Yeah, and I think it's really a testament to what a strong POV she had even as a young filmmaker, and how she fought for that vision. And I think you see it in this whole run of her films. Like, she came out of the gate saying, like, this is how I see women, and this is how I see interpersonal relationships, and I'm going to keep doing it. And you see it over and over again with these quote unquote difficult women, but she has such empathy for them because they're not actually difficult. They're just actual women. And I love that.
They're just dealing.
They're just who they're just
whatever hand
real.
happens to be dealt with them at the moment.
Yeah.
And I'm also drawn towards films that portray introversion. Like, you know, Kay is kind of an introvert. And, you know, I think of, there's that film Heavy by James Mangold, where Pruitt Taylor Vince just plays the ultimate introvert who barely can convey any emotion and talk to people. And I think that also leads us to, you know, just Janet Frame in, you know, her the way she really had struggled with social cues to where people really thought something was mentally wrong with her, you know. But it's, you know, An Angel at My Table is also a film. Yes, it's a biopic about Janet Frame, but it's also a film about like hypersensitivity and just like, you know, not knowing how to interact with other people at times. But at the same time, she finds this love of writing and self-expression and finds romance in experiencing solitude, which I think a lot of writers can relate to. You know?
Yeah.
I love Angel at My Table almost just as much as Sweeney.
This was one of the last Campions I saw. One of my mentors in grad school, this was his favorite, not just his favorite Campion, I think maybe his favorite movie. And he's a writer, so I couldn't really see why he loved it so much. I was sort of daunted by how long it is. I was like, I don't know if I can handle this. But it flies by. It really flies by. Carrie Fox is brilliant in it.
Oh, God. Yeah.
And so, like, definitely listeners, if you haven't seen it, don't be afraid of the length. It'll fly by.
It's in chapters too, just in case you're really afraid. You can take breaks. It gives you moments.
Right.
Refill your water, you know, use the facilities. It's okay. It'll be all right. It'll wait for you. Yeah.
And it does the thing that I prefer in my biopics in that it's not like a greatest hits clip show or, you know, necessarily like these are the most amazing moments and look at how amazing they were. It's really strung together. And in this, like we mentioned, it jumps through chapters in time. There's this horrific section that takes place inside the mental institution when Frame was wrongfully diagnosed with schizophrenia that just, oh my Lord, it unnerves me to no end, especially in just knowing how, mental health was treated back then. And certainly like if you showed any signs of awkwardness, then yes, next thing you know, you're getting electroshock treatments. I mean, it's so hard to watch.
It's really, I think a lot of her films that are about like intellectual women showcase the way that like pushing against how you expect women to be often becomes violent, like from the state, right? And you see it in this one. You kind of see it in Holy Smoke a little bit, and even The Piano, where these women are just pushing against what women are supposed to be. And if you push against what women are supposed to be, especially back 100+ years ago, you must be crazy. And so we're going to treat you that way. And it's really interesting to, starting in the 90s, you saw a lot of women filmmakers, I think, push back against this idea that there were so many crazy women in the past. Because I think a lot of people that are, they went mad. It's no, they probably didn't. they probably didn't.
I think we're still reckoning with that. I think there's still a lot of misunderstanding about just how pervasive that was, and that like, we're going to have a long conversation about that real bloody soon.
And more so, I
agree.
Women than I'm sure there were plenty. There were plenty of
specifically women. Yeah, no, like any sign of resistance. Oh, they're crazy. Lock them up. Melanie Laurent's last movie, The Mad Woman's Ball.
That film
showed this off, and I just finished.
Oh man, I need to watch that because I need to be right up my.
It's on Prime.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Angel at My Table made me think about that quite a bit. Because I just finished a book. I think it's called The Woman Who Would Not Be Silenced, and the idea of like just how many women, if they resisted the powers in their lives, like namely the men, but even sometimes their mothers or like their mothers-in-law, it's like, no, you're causing too much trouble. You are not well. We need to deal with this. And the dealing with this just was so terribly violent. And just, there's just so many of these that we've completely forgotten about. Angel at My Table definitely reminded me of that. Like as Mariah was saying.
Yeah, it's and I think it takes, for the most part, women talking about these things because even men who aren't actively participating in the silencing of women kind of do, even though they don't mean to.
Right.
This is just really stunning film, and Carrie Fox was one of those actresses that really was in a ton of interesting films in the 90s, and then today, unless you're a fan of one of those films, most people don't know who she is, which is a real bummer because she had like hit after hit, or at least, not hit in terms of like box office, but like her filmography as an actress in the 90s is one of the unparalleled runs, I think.
It was kind of crazy seeing her in this, like playing so awkward and gawkish, like, because my introduction to her was Shallow Grave, where she's just so much more assured.
She's so good in Shallow Grave.
And I'm like, so when I was watching Angel at My Table this time, I was kind of tilting my head. I was like, wait a second. It's just such. I was like, wait, I remember you. What's going on here?
She's also fantastic in Gillian Armstrong's Last Days of Shay New, which sometimes is on Netflix, but I don't know if that ever got released really on DVD, but it's another.
And in Bright Star, of course.
Stunning one. Yeah.
And The Dressmaker by Jocelyn Moorhouse.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And side note, I think Gillian Armstrong next year, Mariah.
She's fantastic.
We got to do that. We got to do that episode because I'm so excited to watch her work.
So many good movies.
Yeah, for sure. And I shared my thoughts extensively before on The Piano, but I, of course, want to hear what both of you think of her most acclaimed breakthrough film that won her the Academy Award for Best Director, and rightfully so. Like I mentioned early on, it has a classical structure that is very lyrical and compassionate, containing some of the best imagery that she's ever captured. It's one that I've seen many times and always find something new and exciting in it that I hadn't picked up on before. And it's obviously very sensual and erotic and beautiful and all those adjectives that we all know. But I did ramble on a lot about this one in the past. So I'll let the two of you sort of share your love of The Piano.
I'm super excited for the Criterion release that just came out. I have not picked it up yet. I'm waiting for the sale, but because I have a gift card. But the DVD that I have was such a terrible transfer, just ugly, horrible transfer. I can't even believe it got released like that. So I'm very excited for people to see how lush the cinematography is on this, because it's stunning. And if you only saw the DVD, you would have no idea how gorgeous it is. But this is another one. Like I said, most of the women that I interviewed last year, I would say 40% of them became filmmakers because of The Piano. I think people kind of understand the importance of this film, but I really don't think people really know how many women saw this movie as a girl or as a teenager, or as in their young 20s, and said, I can make a movie now because of this movie. More so, I think, than even Catherine Bigelow. At least from the women I've interviewed, this is a landmark film for so many reasons. And every time you watch it, it reveals like new layers because it's so dense.
Exactly. Yeah.
But it doesn't feel dense. It's not one of those movies where you watch it and you're like, I've got to do homework now. Like it's so emotional. It washes over you. But every time you watch it, you're like, oh, well, I didn't notice that before. Oh my God, I didn't notice that before.
Right.
Stunning.
The scale of this movie, I think, is what is like one of the amazing achievements of it. It just, because I feel like there was this thought process in the industry that was like, if we're going to give somebody like Jane Campion a movie, or if we're going to give somebody like Catherine Bigelow a movie, or Agnes Varda a movie, we got to keep the budget down. So let them tell the story of the woman peeling potatoes for 20 minutes. Like keep it in an apartment, keep it in a square block. Yeah, here's your $5 million. Go make your movie. Seeing somebody like Campion widen out the scope of the film and taking in the whole shore and walking up the mountain and taking in the forest and just, letting the rain pour down on us and tell one of these grand stories that boys have been able to tell for so long. It hits you so much harder. It's like, holy shit, this is just incredible. Like, why aren't there more of these?
It's wild. It was made on a relatively small budget, $7 million in the 90s, and it made $140 million.
It's so doable. It's like if you get somebody who's pragmatic, it's so doable.
She still had to fight to make the next few movies she wanted to make because
that's nuts. Wow.
They still didn't trust women. And like this woman showed you she could like I can't even do the math there. It was like 15 times the budget or something.
Yeah.
And you're still like, I don't know. You're like, just let her do whatever she wants.
20 times the budget, actually.
20 times.
It cost them $7 million, which is like pocket change at Miramax at the time. And it made $140 million.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
But what I love about this movie is it truly is one of the most erotic movies ever made. It really, I think one of you mentioned, one of you mentioned how she's so good at passion. And this one is just, it's almost all Holly Hunter's face and body too, because she doesn't, she only speaks in voiceover, right? You only hear her thoughts. And I don't know how Holly Hunter did this. She won the Oscar she deserved because I don't know how she did this, how she did just emoted so much. It must have been exhausting wearing all those costumes too. And then doing that.
What's crazy about this, this movie really works on so many levels, like you said, but even just certain moments and gestures that you wouldn't expect to be erotic are like just a tear in her stocking. I mean, obviously that is meant to be, yes, like something kinky's going on, and certainly in the mind subtle. Of Harvey Keitel, right? Exactly. Not subtle, but just like little, or even just, Harvey Keitel polishing a piano naked. I'm like, that's pretty hot. Just like little choices to include moments like that normally other directors may not think to include, I think gives this movie so much power in terms of its sensuality that every time I watch, I'm just like, wow, how does she do this? And get away with it.
I really don't know how she's so good at finding these moments. And part of it must be she worked with the same editor for a handful of her films. The editor is clearly able to help her find these moments, but she's the one that shoots them, right? So she shoots all these moments and then somehow is able to cobble it together. Too. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then she cobbles it all together and you're like, what is your mind like? But I do think one thing that is apparent in Campion's films is that she didn't go to film school. She was a painter. She studied art and and then came to film from there. And I think that certain filmmakers, I love them, but certain filmmakers root all of their films in other films. And what I think is so unique about Campion is she roots most of her visual language in art.
You can totally see that. Yeah, I didn't thank you for that. I did not know that. But the second you say that, I'm like, yeah.
Well, same with David Lynch. David Lynch was an artist. Obviously, he went to AFI, but he started out, his first degree is in art. And I think both of them have such a unique visual language because their art is rooted in classical painting, and in what's the word I'm looking for?
Expressionism.
Expressing themselves through visual language, as opposed to expressing yourself through cinematic language. And I think you can tell when a filmmaker comes from either all film, or if they come from a different art practice. And I think that's part of why I'm drawn, even though I love film and I've seen a million films, I like the filmmakers who I can tell they didn't just grow up in a video store. They've seen other things, and they bring that to film.
Your De Palma, who obviously just binged on Hitchcock constantly, or someone like Tarantino, who obviously worked in a video store. But at the same time, I think I go back to just even how you're mentioning the visual language of something like The Piano. Is there any director that shoots holding hands or caressing hands?
No.
Anything with hands better than Jane Campion?
No one does. This is she gets how erotic it is, and she shoots it as erotic as it is. And I feel like she must have been a handholder as a when she was first dating or something, so she really gets the power that comes from like an illicit hand touch.
Remind me to mention that when we get to Bright Star. Please remind me of that, because I'm watching.
I mean, so many illicit hand touches in that movie. Yeah. It's lovely.
Yeah, but I think the only thing I came across is just the portrayal of the Maori tribe as being questionable. Yet I know she consulted with a lot of the members of that tribe.
Yeah, I think that it's one of those, like, she did the best she could in terms of she is part of the problem. You know what I mean? Like she comes from colonizers.
And she was given $7 million to do this on a budget that was like really, really controlled. I'm sure if somebody like her had her way, she would have been like, let's get some Maori actors in here, because we can probably get them fairly easily and rather cheap. But I'm sure somebody at the studio was like, no, you need some you need some pros. We're already giving you this much rope in a gamble. We can't go that far. So I do want to believe that she asked. I don't think that she never asked, but
yeah. But she did also, like, Cliff Curtis got his start here, and obviously he is one of the most well-known Maori actors. I do think that it's a combo of, even if a lot of like well-meaning liberals today will film something, and then someone from that actual community will be like, you're still a little gazy. And I don't know that she could ever remove that gaziness from it. Right. But I do think that you can see she's attempting to, like, the jump from the way that the indigenous people are shown here, and then say like Jennifer Kent's The Nightingale, you can see how much more freedom a filmmaker has, and how much more awareness filmmakers who aren't of those people are. Same with Whale Rider. Like, you can see the change. You can see the change in what is being allowed with government money, and the way, education in terms of just knowing how to not be gazy.
Mariah, did you ever see Waru?
I don't think so.
That one's, if anybody who's interested in seeing a Maori story, it's told by 8 filmmakers, 8 Maori women. Basically, they take chapters of the same death ceremony, and they tell like basically 20 minutes of the story at a time. It's an incredible film. It's an incredible piece of representation. That's just, it's so rare.
What's that called again?
Waru, Waru.
Okay.
There's also a lovely documentary called Marya, How Mum Decolonized the Screen. It's about a woman who was attempting to change the way that Indigenous, I think Australians actually, but maybe New Zealand. No, it was New Zealand, were portrayed through documentaries. And obviously there was a lot of resistance to the kind of film she made, but definitely if we're talking about present representation, it's a wonderful film. I think it's on Netflix. her son made it to sort of make sure her legacy of pushing for actual representation of their culture being captured on screen before they were all systematically killed is really powerful.
Yeah, and obviously this entire cast is pretty spectacular and everything, including little Anna Paquin. I'm just like, oh my gosh, she really knocked it out of the park in her first role.
I interviewed her during The Irishman, and I asked her about this film, and she basically was like, she went with a friend to the open call because she was bored.
Oh wow.
and then they cast her, and she was like, oh, it'll be fun. And then she won an Oscar.
She's got a whole career out of it.
Obviously found her calling. But she wasn't like, she didn't grow up being like, I want to be an actress. She was just, doing what kids do. It's crazy.
Yeah. And it's just funny too. Anytime I think I've seen In the Mouth of Madness too many times, because I always just picture Sam Neill yelling, "This is not reality." And so whenever he yells in a movie, I kind of laugh and snicker a bit. But yeah, like his work in that Zhilovsky film Possession.
Yeah, I just saw that for the first time last year, and I was like, wow, he went from My Brilliant Career to that, and I'm like, what? The range.
No kidding, right? Yeah. No, and
then doing the piano and Jurassic Park in the same year.
Yeah,
in the same
That's
year.
amazing.
You're like, dang, he can do anything.
Mariah, I remember when we talked about Power of the Dog, you were talking about how this film is an incredible example of like looking at the two men and their relationship with Ada in this movie, and like kind of their different approach to their relationship and want. Yeah.
I can't exactly remember what I said on that podcast, but I definitely feel like it's two different kinds of men in terms of seeing women still as property and seeing women as a partner and as an equal. And I think Ada is somebody who already knew that she could find an equal, and she did that. And that's why she has this child out of wedlock, and the man turned out to be shit and left her and everything, but spoilers. But I think she's somebody who is strong enough in her personhood that she's looking for more. And, her father sells her, which is, of course, she ends up with another man who sees her as property, just like her father did. And I think finding somebody like Keitel's character who actually respects women and sees women as human throws her for a really big loop. And I do think that there are still, we want to be like, oh, that was 100 years ago. Men don't think that way. I think a lot of men still see women that way.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah. That's why it still feels so almost righteous to see these men who see women as property portrayed, because I think we try to pretend that men don't think that way still, but they do.
It should be like the first date question. Would you haul a piano off the beach for me?
Yeah.
Because that's really what it comes down to. One of them is like, no, fuck it, we're leaving it. The other one is like, no, I can get this up there. It's good.
I'll figure it out.
And at the end of it, it's like, that's a big reason why he endeared himself to her.
I read a lot of those Reddit "Am I the Asshole" posts.
Yeah, me too. All the time.
It's fascinating how most of the time, if it's a married, like a straight cis married couple, most of the time it's a woman asking, am I the asshole because I want some autonomy from my husband, or flipped, a husband saying, am I the asshole because my wife is doing something that shows she's a human of her own volition or whatever. And I'm always just like, how are these people still out in this world?
They don't read books.
I don't know. It's rough. I like to read those because it keeps me grounded, that I have surrounded myself with really nice people.
Yeah, totally.
Oh, yeah, exactly. But I know I read a couple of criticisms that they didn't buy the growing attraction basically because Harvey Keitel as Baines is committing some sort of blackmail, sexual assault kind of scenario, at least in the beginning. And I completely buy that she desires him equally. It's reciprocated. It's sort of
got slowly the piano off the beach.
Exactly. That's all it takes.
It's like, well, I mean, that's a big thing. It's like, this was obviously clearly important to her. The man who she's supposed to be spending her life with is like, fuck it, it's staying. Right. Another man is like, I got this. You're like, here's a person who understands the importance of this thing to this other person. That kind of recognition is reciprocated. It's not rocket science. It's like, seriously, see what is important to a person and celebrate it with them. If not, like the gesture, we can get into a whole other thing of maybe they're white knighting or whatnot. But it's really, at the end of the day, it's one of them said, leave it. One of them said, I can take it. And the importance was recognized.
And he also wants Ada to desire him rather than just be coerced into affection too.
Yeah. It doesn't hurt.
And I do think that calling it coercion and saying it's sexual assault sort of misses what I think the give and take in any sexual situation in real life. There's always a little bit of a game there. Mm-hmm. The line is finding out, like, is it actually manipulation or is it just the give and take of two people becoming one person? Not to quote the Spice Girls, but I had to quote the Spice Girls there. Sorry. I do think that there's always a little bit. I mean, that's the whole reason that there is the language around sexuality is tops and bottoms and doms and submissives and things like that. It's like, that's just sort of how it's a conversation, and there's always a slightly more dominant person in a conversation. How you find out if you're in a equally fulfilling sexual relationship is if the give and take is there, right? And I do think that this relationship has a give and a take. It's not all take from George, and it's not all give from Ada. There's a mixture there, but you have to get through the whole movie to see that, especially once you get to the end and you see they've finally hit a place where they are like giving and taking, but combined together, and that's my take.
I agree with that way more than sort of dismissing it the way I read a couple of people do. And I'm like, that's kind of a limited way to look at it, really. But I mean, for me, I responded to this movie, like, even early on when I first saw it, is just the simple fact that, again, I was a little shy and introverted, and the way I did make connections with other people was through music and playing the piano or the guitar. And that's kind of how I socialized and made friends. And so even just on that base level, I was kind of like, oh, I really respond to, just that fact that she finds her voice and uses it through playing the piano. And, that poor piano for a while was just stuck on this beach, and she was sort of stuck in this unfathomable situation, and she was mute and she couldn't express herself. But at the same time, when she was able to play the piano, suddenly she felt connected. Suddenly she's smiling again, and she's having an interpersonal connection with another human being. And the piano is sort of the catalyst for that as well. And I dig that 100%.
The three of us are all writers. We can certainly, latch on to the happiness you feel when somebody wants to read something you wrote. When somebody takes an interest in something you create or you are interested in, it endears you to them in such a profound way.
Oh, it really does. It's that connection, not just physically, because they clearly feel that, but intellectually.
Yeah. Thank you for listening. Thank you for reading.
Yeah, and I think they find that in each other.
Totally.
100%. Yeah, no, definitely. And yeah, emotional intelligence is something that I think is one of Campion's strengths throughout all of her work. However, Portrait of a Lady is a film I've seen twice now, and I still can't connect with it. And
my God, I love it.
I feel bad.
So much.
I feel so bad.
I love it so much.
No,
it's so wild.
I need to share a really, really quick story. I got to catch a screening of this at the Lightbox, not far from my apartment here in Toronto. And I offered my wife, Lindsay, the opportunity if she wants to come with me or not. She declined. And when I came home, I was like, I feel like I just cheated on you. Like, there was just so many corsets in this movie and fevered looks and misinterpreted words. She's like, yeah, I Googled that after you left and I immediately regretted not going with you. I was like, so why didn't you come? She goes, I thought you were going to see Portrait of a Lady on Fire again. She's like, I'm like, why did you think that? Did you think I just like dropped the words at the end? She's like, yeah, you do that. I was like, oh, I do. So I got this big screen alone. It was magical. I enjoyed. I'm happy I saw it now, because if I had seen this when it dropped in '96, I wouldn't have been ready for it. This like hit me right at the right time for this kind of story.
Yeah, I wasn't ready for it when I first saw it, and I'm pretty sure I'd seen The Piano and was actually looking forward to it. And certainly seeing that cast, I was kind of like, whoa, I'm. And you know, people like Viggo Mortensen show up in this now, and you kind of go, wow, look at all these people that, you know, Christian Bale shows up in a small part, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
The credits start rolling, and you're like, what?
Yeah,
what? Yeah, it just keeps on going.
No, but for me, it's kind of one of those outside looking in experiences for me. I mean, I love Barbara Hershey in this, and Martin Donovan, who is just, you know, I'm going to mention this later, but a lot like Paul Schneider is kind of one of those actors who doesn't get the kind of acclaim I think, you know, they both deserve. And this is probably my favorite Martin Donovan performance, I think. I mean, yes, obviously his work with Hal Hartley is amazing, but I do love the score. And again, and I say this a lot, but the attention to detail is really perfect throughout. I don't know. And, you know, Mariah, you'll probably disagree. I don't know if I like the casting of Malkovich here.
Oh no, he's perfect. He's perfect.
I just feel I see Malkovich.
That is the best acting with a parasol I have ever seen.
He's the only actor I can think of who is this weird combination of incredibly erotic and incredibly off-putting at the same time. And I mean, obviously I like fell for him really hard when I was like 9, which tells you a lot about my taste in men. But he's both alluring and repulsive at the same time. And I think it's perfect because the film is about this woman who is so hell-bent on being her own person, on being free, and she has the money to be free. And she meets this person that just, like all the other men, kind of, she can resist them. She sees their charms, but she knows they'll take away her freedom, right? Sure. She meets this one man, and he's just so alluring that she keeps ignoring all the red flags. And you have to cast somebody who can do that, who can make you feel that. And I feel the parasol, yes, the way he is with that, the way his voice is like butter. It's like you put me in a room with Malkovich, and I'd be like, you know what, I give up.
Yeah, I can change him. I got it.
Feel it.
I just see the same kind of. I mean, I still see like just kind of like a different take on the manipulator he played in Dangerous Liaisons, more or less.
It's similar,
yeah,
but I mean, I think they're similar characters.
Yeah. No, that's true. I mean, I guess it's kind of perfect casting when you put it that way, but I think at the same time I was like, I wonder what it would be like for somebody. I almost want to say that she said maybe William Hurt was going to play that role, and I don't know if that would have been better. I don't think.
I wouldn't buy William Hurt as much. He's good in Jane Eyre, his version of Rochester, mostly because he's more repulsive than charming. He turns the charm on occasionally. I think with this character, you have to be both at the same time. I don't know that Hurt can do both at the same time. He can kind of oscillate between the two.
Yeah, but there's really great moments throughout the movie in that sort of like Dali-esque black and white silent short in the middle of this film to sort of evoke that grand tour that she's going on.
Yeah,
is stunning. I love that so much. Kind of reminds me of Guy Madden a little bit, the kind of stuff that he does, and obviously pays homage to.
It does have that kind of Guy Madden feel to it.
Yeah, and there's definitely earned emotion, especially obviously the scene late in the film towards the end between Donovan and Kidman, as he's dying. I'm kind of like, good Lord, that's some of the more sublime and sad things we get, and that she would later even do even more strongly in something like Bright Star. But yeah, no, I don't dislike the movie. It's more of like I'm in the middle on it. Like there are things I love. I just don't get emotionally invested as strongly as I would hope based on my response. Oh, I watched it a week ago.
You watched it? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's one of those ones I feel like it grows the more you come back to it.
So maybe the third viewing, it'll go up. Yeah, no, that's possible. And I mean, I love the line Donovan says late in the film with pain is deep, but it passes and the love remains. I mean, come on. That's my shit. Saying things like that is just, it has moments where I'm totally intoxicated by it, but not the whole experience. And I feel bad because I want to love everything, but maybe maybe it will happen with subsequent like this one isn't as readily available, right? Like, this
is the only one I couldn't get back to for this show.
I think Shout Factory put it out on Blu-ray about 10 years ago, but that's really hard to find now. And also like an old school Blu-ray, so it's not even that great of a master. It's definitely one that I keep hoping will get rediscoveady and reassessed.
Criterion,
the way,
if you're listening.
Yeah, the way that In the Cut was, because it's definitely far more heady than some of her other films, which is another reason I really like it. Is it's definitely like more on an intellectual level than even The Piano is.
I remember this was the first film where there were actually expectations, like across the board. It's like, we got the director of The Piano working with Nicole Kidman, and there's John Malkovich, and it's Miramax again, and it's going to have an Oscar push behind it, and just kind of like there's that show.
Yeah, they dropped it in Oscar December. Buzz. Like,
and they clearly wanted this to be something that would get Oscar attention, and it just didn't latch for whatever reasons in '96. It was kind of a clear runway in that year. It was kind of the year that the Oscar kind of really turned to the independents with the stuff like Fargo and English Patience and that kind of thing.
The woman who wrote the screenplay has mostly written films that have been misunderstood. She wrote High Tide, which is one of Gillian Armstrong's great films with like fantastic Judy Davis performance, but another one that is a quote unquote difficult woman, and it got dismissed when it was released. She wrote An Angel at My Table.
And she wrote Oscar and Lucinda, which she wrote
Oscar and Lucinda. She wrote 1,000 Acres. Like, she's
Possession,
mostly
Brick Lane. She did Angela's Ashes too.
Yeah, I think Angela's Ashes and Possession are the only two where a man directed her films. So I liked Possession. I haven't seen Angela's Ashes, but she's definitely someone who gravitates towards quote unquote difficult women, and mostly works with filmmakers who thrive in presenting difficult women. And I think what's interesting about that as a collaboration is that they root themselves in a kind of presentation of womanhood that isn't necessarily palatable and isn't necessarily what people are used to. And so even if you have watched Armstrong's films or Campion's films, they still push past what they've already shown you and ask you to go even further in to that space. And I like that she was able to make so many of these movies. She sort of obviously stopped for the last few years, which is a bummer, but she has a really interesting filmography.
Yeah, and so I guess we'll move forward to Holy Smoke. And holy smoke, do I adore Kate Winslet. I think she's the main thing I love about this movie is her performance, because it's something we hadn't seen from her, I don't believe, up until this point, just in terms of the layers and the many things, that the dimension that she brings to this character. But at the same time, as someone who has like this avid interest in stories about cults and deprogramming and how people get manipulated, it's another film that I wish I felt more strongly about in the end. Maybe it's just because the tones kind of clash a little bit here for me in terms of the comedic touches and stuff like that. I mean, it does sort of harken back, like I mentioned earlier, to the sense of humor surrounding sort of family dynamics and internal conflict that we got with something like Sweetie. But I'm just not sure if the tones here mesh quite as well.
I think this is the only sort of misfire for me in all of Campion's, and even as a misfire, I love it. But it definitely, I think it was a really big swing, and I don't think it all lands.
Yeah.
But what does land is great. Like their performances are great. Keitel in a dress is fantastic. Keitel when he's introduced
and lipstick.
Yeah. Keitel when he's introduced in the airport with those boots.
And Neil Diamond needle drop. I'm there.
And I mean, the one thing I will 100% say about Campion is she understands how hot Keitel is more than any other filmmaker. She really captures what is so sensuous about him. Because he's a short king, and I think a lot of short men don't get their dues. And she's like, no, this is a hot man, and we're gonna appreciate this. And I really like that about this film and the piano. But this more so, I think this is the hottest he's probably ever been. But I do think that some of the stuff they're trying to do with the new age sort of themes don't quite land.
And why cast Pam Grier if you're not going to use her? That really disappoints me to some degree, because like she's coming off of Jackie Brown and stuff like that, and I'm kind of like, she's just not really there. But I know it's not her story either. So
it really, like, there's just some things that don't quite work in this movie, but it's definitely one I want to watch again because, like Brian said about Portrait of a Lady, that one has grown on me every time I rewatch it. So it's been about 5 or 6 years since I've seen this one. So it's definitely one I feel like I need to.
It's another one that's harder to find too.
I need to give another. We had it on Filmstruck for a while. I should have rewatched it because I made a bunch of GIFs of Harvey Keitel in a dress. You can find those on the internet for sure.
Yeah. Ryan, what did you think of Holy Smoke?
This was the first time I saw Holy Smoke. I think of her entire filmography. This was the first one that I was seeing for the first time for this show. I mean, it's very 1999. It's very much, Hollywood is starting to try the weird stuff. And Sundance is kind of like more and more taking over with every year. It's interesting, like, again, in terms of careers, to watch Kate Winslet like really peel away from the corsets and bonnets and the Titanicness of her early career and start to do some weirder, like, to kind of get back to the early Australian and New Zealand stuff that she was doing at the beginning of her career. I was really taken in by the whole deprogramming of occults thing. I think I must have read a book that was talking about that recently, because that's a thing that, again, that, like, kind of like what we were talking about with the not reckoning with how many women have been sent into insane asylums and mental health centers. It's a thing that we haven't really reckoned with, as how many cults were built up by men who basically built themselves a harem, in the name of enlightenment, and just how often this has happened in the name of so-called enlightenment, and what it takes to not undo that, but what it takes to reverse that effect. I look at something like this, and I look at something like Martha, Marcy, May, Marlene, which just did it so much better.
Oh yeah. No kidding. Yeah.
So which there's thing I would like to combine the two. I'd like to put like things of this into that movie. So it's, it's messy. It's not something that, like, if I was programming a Jane Campion retrospective, this wouldn't exactly be opening night, but there are a lot of things in it that I like, not to mention the push pull late in this movie of Harvey Keitel in a dress and Kate Winslet basically just trying to see how far she can push him.
Yeah, and I do think sort of there's a little bit of voyeurism in the way that she presents the cult, because it is in India that I think is very specific to actually the Australian, New Zealand experience. I think a lot of, because it's so close, there was a lot of this happening during the New Age moment where wayward girls would run off to India. And I think she's trying to look at both the danger of that, but also the fact that all these girls were looking for something. And I don't think that lands quite as deeply. Like, it's definitely trying to show why they fall prey to this and why we're looking for escapes. But I think it needed, like, to balance that a little stronger.
I mean, oddly, Oddly enough, you could do it without India. Like, oddly enough, you could totally do this with, here is this charismatic person who lives remotely.
Yeah, and then the exoticism would be there.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I think that's some of the stuff. Like, she uses some sorry, my phone just rang. She uses some hold on, what was I saying? I'm sorry,
she uses some mysticism.
My pet food just called. Miss Fanny's tuna's here, and I couldn't get it to hang up. Oh, she uses some very exoticized imagery of Hindu goddesses and gods in a way that is very 90s, very new agey.
Yeah,
it doesn't.
I mean, even that age. Yeah, even that shot late in the film where she thinks she sees the mirage, and it turns out to be like the three people of her family splitting off. Like, I don't think you probably wouldn't have that quite as much these days.
It doesn't. It hasn't. It's the one aspect of the film that just really doesn't age. No. Hasn't aged well.
Yeah,
but was very of its time. So you know.
When I was just a little girl, I asked my mother, what will I be? Will I be pretty? Will I be rich? Here's what she said to me. Que sera?
All right. In the cut. Let's
cut.
Woo!
Cut.
Yes, this is another title I did review kind of extensively on the last episode, but I think again with more rewatches, it's only growing higher and higher in my mind as another remarkable work of art. You know, I mean, I guess the only critique I had when I first saw it was just like, yeah, it sort of slips a little bit into the serial killer genre convention towards the end with like, oh, let's reveal the killer and all that stuff. But that doesn't bother me now. It doesn't at all. I there's no denying the power of that final shot. And this movie is just red hot and sort of like doused in just this interesting imagery that I don't think we'd ever seen before, because the sort of like hazy lens framing here and there, like, so because sometimes things are so out of focus except for what's in the middle of the frame. That's really a nice touch that I don't think we'd seen before in any of her work. And yet it's also doused in like the trauma of 9/11 and just the dangers of predatory men, and it plays like a fever dream. It's like a fever dream of desire and fear. This is almost, it could be a David Lynch movie, I think.
It's definitely the closest Venn diagram between these two filmmakers, and you can absolutely see why I love them both in this movie.
Totally.
Yes.
If this movie was made by Brian De Palma, it would be like hailed as a classic.
Yeah, and except that
Absolutely,
he could not make this movie.
Like, no, he could make this story, but it would be very different.
Exactly.
In terms of its presentation.
What's kind of depressing in terms of its reception is if you're the kind of film goer who you're like, oh, I just heard of this movie, I'm going to go check Rotten Tomatoes, which is a lot of how people assess how to dig through just the vast amount of films that are available to people right now. You would see that it's at 33% and you might stop, right? But if you were to go to, say, its Wikipedia page and look at the reception section, half of it is how it was received at the time, and half of it is like this reappraisal. And you realize this is one of those movies that truly shows the bias of where film criticism was when it was 90% men, right? Yeah. And because there were a few women who saw it and were like, hey, actually, this is doing some interesting things. And there were a few men who got it. But for the most part, the men were like, what is this? I don't get it. And in the retrospective, you have mostly millennial women coming in and saying, like, this is amazing. This is doing all kinds of things. It's taking a genre and subverting it, but still appreciating what makes the genre. Yeah. It's just, I remember being really hesitant to watch it because of its reception. And then I saw it and I was like, what the hell movie did these guys see?
Yeah, that was totally my reaction coming out of TIFF. I was like, did I have my festival goggles on? Because I feel like I enjoyed that way more than a lot of other people were like giving it. I was like, listen, I can understand how this is not somebody's thing. I don't understand the hatred for it.
And part of what's fascinating about the way that she subverts some of these tropes is that the women are still murdered in disgusting ways, but you're put directly in the perception of these women and of the women around the women that are being murdered in a way that a lot of these films don't do. It also would make a really interesting double feature with Looking for Mr. Goodbar, which has as similar. I think that's another film I watched the first time last year, and I actually do think it's much better than its reception.
It's another one because
I don't think that it's as misogynistic as people claim it is. I think it's being really honest about the dangers of casual dating. Frankly, and it's also sort of a metaphor for the end of the quote unquote 60s, even though it was the 70s when it was made. But both movies really show the danger that women put themselves in being as sexually adventurous as men, because women for the most part don't murder men. It's men who murder women.
Right. Yeah.
and you have to be much more trusting as a woman to let men in, as a straight cis woman who, and for some, frankly, as a trans woman too. Trans women obviously have to be super trusting, and that's why they are the most murdered. This movie makes people uncomfortable because it shows that, but then it also makes people uncomfortable because it shows how voracious women are sexually, and that's just, they're supposed to be objects. They're not supposed to be the hunter.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of men saw this and like, does not compute. Nope.
No, because it puts us into Franny's seat and makes us understand like how she is seen. Like every time one of the guys looks at her, whether it's Mark Ruffalo or whether it's her student or whether it's Ruffalo's partner or whoever, any of the guys, like it goes out of its way to put the camera in her seat, and it's like, here's how the man is looking at this person. Now, how do you feel? Like, do you feel unsafe? Well, yeah, welcome. You know, it so specifically goes out of its way to put the camera in her chair. And that's one of the reasons why it succeeds.
Yes, yeah. I agree with that. I think, but one of the reasons why I think it made a lot of people who aren't used to this uncomfortable. Because it makes you,
because you're not used to being looked at that way.
And it makes you feel the consumption.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and all the mentioned counters they possess this hint of danger, and they set off these red flags. Like there's an unhinged, I believe, uncredited Kevin Bacon who's just oh man,
just a weirdo.
Okay,
just such a weirdo.
The thing that's so great about that thing is that I feel like that was a secret among women, right? That because you watch it now, right? You see conversations about just conversations that women have with men on apps, where they go from wanting to be in your pants to calling you a dumb bitch in like 30 seconds. Right. And people see that escalation now, and people understand that escalation now. And I think I think they still maybe think that that's unique to the app age or dating online age. And it's absolutely not true. Men have always gone from 0 to 10, and women weren't able to tell those stories. Women weren't believed when they told those stories. Women were murdered, you know? And what's interesting is she shows all the different kind of men that might have hurt her, and all the different kind of men that she has to navigate their escalation in feelings so that they don't hurt her. And you know, it goes to that whole women can't lead because they're too emotional. And it's like, no, actually it's men that are too emotional. That's why more crimes of passion are committed by men than anybody. And it dares the audience to think about that, and to think about all the ways that women navigate male anger and male, like, predatory male desire over and over and over. But you can't, if you're also attracted to men, you have to find a way to be comfortable with that. You know, it's such a balance, and she does it so well in this.
Yeah, and she finds that balance too, even with the sex scenes, because they're kind of exquisite and just focusing so intently on her pleasure, and it makes that all the more meaningful. And certainly she captures the kind of closeness that these two sisters have, the love they have for each other. That sort of intimacy is also something we don't normally see, just like, how they're holding one another, and it's just, and it makes the unfortunate, spoiler alert, death of Jennifer Jason Leigh in this all the more powerful and sad, and just knowing the kind of closeness those two sisters shared together.
It's really like a mixture of all kinds of things she's done throughout her career, through the lens of a psychosexual erotic drama, a thriller, and it's I think the most brilliant use of her themes.
It's interesting to me that it's the only film that she ever shot in America. It's her second. It's her second American story now with The Power of the Dog, but it's the only film she ever shot outside of Australia, New Zealand, or like she's working in England and Italy for Portrait of a Lady, but this one was 100% in New York City, which it's just one of those things of getting her just a little bit outside of herself and what she brings, because you're going to be comfortable in the studios you shoot in and the locations you shoot in if there's something a little bit more your lane. It's part of the reason why, you hear about the New York directors shoot New York a little bit better and the LA directors shoot LA a little bit better. Mariah and I, somewhere in the annals of my podcasting canon, have a long conversation about LA being shot and how what you gotta look for. I think we were talking about Drive. But it's interesting to see her approach New York as the setting for her story, as the ground for her story, and how she shoots it. She shoots it in a very, very workaday manner. She doesn't kind of get outside of it and go to those, aside from the bridge, she doesn't get outside of it and kind of go to those more flowery locations. She stays in much more working class New York, and uses that for the setting and captures it in such an interesting way.
Yeah, it's definitely kind of the way she uses New York. She highlights the danger side of it. Whereas, we were talking about After Hours earlier, everything that character goes through in New York is me as a country bumpkin. I'm like, what is he doing? Why is he in these places alone? This is terrifying. And he's just a New Yorker, and it's fine. And it's not really shot in a this is dangerous. Even Taxi Driver, showing the worst aspects of Times Square, he's luxuriating in it. He's not saying this is dangerous. Yeah. And I think she uses New York as a visitor and shows, Franny doesn't see the danger, but Campion sees the danger, and she shoots it so that you as the viewer see the danger that Franny's in, even when Franny doesn't. And I think that's really interesting. That's
why I feel so anxious watching this whole movie.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah.
When she goes down to the basement at the beginning, that's just New Yorkers just do that.
Yeah,
and
I'm where's the bathroom? Oh, it's down that dark stairway in the back.
That's fine. And I'm like, don't go there. What are you doing? Yeah.
No, I'm so glad people are reappraising this movie, because it's really remarkable, and it shouldn't have been. It was unfairly maligned and dismissed upon its initial release, and I even when I saw it 10 years ago, I saw something special in it.
I keep hoping this will be one that Criterion rescues. I have the DVD, and it has an audio commentary, so there's at least the DVD is decent in terms of Campion getting to talk about what she was doing with this film, but there just needs to be so much more.
I see it coming. I totally see this coming.
I really hope so.
Yeah.
And you should do the audio commentary, Mariah.
Yes, please.
Yes, I would love that.
And you should also do the audio commentary for this next film, of course. Because I'm definitely going to let you sing the praises of this masterpiece, but let me just say I was not going into this episode thinking it would end up becoming my favorite Jane Campion film. But it is. And there's just not a single moment. There's not a single frame I would change. It's this warm exploration of the sensation of being in love And when it starts with that needle going into the thread, and then later in the film, Keats actually says to Fanny that we must cut the threads, and just like little things that connect visually or through dialogue. Nearly every line spoken, every gesture, every hand being held, like I mentioned, and even just the simplicity of the score and that harpsichord. It reminded me, they're very different movies, obviously, but when I first saw Phantom Thread, I actually felt the dopamine in my brain rising and getting goosebumps, because I'm like, this is just connecting with me in terms of ways I hadn't expected, because I'm not like the biggest period piece fan in general, and then suddenly a movie like this or Phantom Thread comes my way, and I'm like, I just want to give this movie a big hug. I love everything about it, and it surprised me. I mean, I do love poetry, and I've certainly read some Keats and things like that, but I guess I hadn't anticipated just how strongly I would feel about all three performances here. As I mentioned, I think I even tweeted this out, that Paul Schneider really deserves a lot more recognition for what he does in this film. The relationship that Mr. Brown and John Keats have together, I don't know. I was sensing a little codependency similar to Phil and his brother.
I need to ask this. I don't know if it's just where my head is at in how I am viewing films these days or what. Marya Gates, Keats and Brown, were they strictly writing partners? Because
I think it's unclear both historically and in the film.
Because that would make so much more sense.
I haven't read the biography.
If that's what's happening, so much more is clear. I'm like, either he is in love and feeling threatened and jilted, or he is just a supreme dick and also jilted and threatened. But I'm like, I understand and empathize with the one. The other, I'm just like, what the holy shit? Just especially late on, I'm like, I am just totally picking up vibes here. And this really feels like Brown at least saw Keats more than just a friend and writing associate.
Yeah, I do think that there is, at least in the wake of this film, there was definitely a lot of academics who came out of the work and said that there is thoughts that perhaps they were more than just, roommates. And frankly, I think the history of bisexuality in particular people being bisexual today is half the time people still don't believe that you're queer if you say you're bisexual. And I do think what she shows so strongly is that sexuality is a spectrum and passion is a spectrum, and you don't know who you're gonna connect with. And I think Keats was such an open nerve of a person that he drew deep connections out of people. And you see, what's so great is you see how deeply both Fanny Braun and Mr. Brown fall for him. Mm-hmm. And that's why there's tension between Braun and Brown. And that's why at the end, the scenes with the two of them, there's two different scenes at the end after, Keats heads off to Italy, where you see them not as a lover and a friend, but as two lovers who've lost something. Right. And it's beautiful. But she doesn't have to spell it out either, which I think is why she's such a strong filmmaker.
Exactly.
The thing too is I want to believe in my heart of hearts that men are capable of this kind of friendship. I think it's our great failing as a species that we can't open ourselves up to platonic actual affection, and that women have it so much more over us that they can. Mm-hmm. The only problem is that I feel like a man who was that evolved, who had that kind of streak running through him, wouldn't be so threatened and wouldn't be so much of a dick to Fanny Braun. So I can't marry the two.
Yeah, I do think that she's implying that a bit.
Yeah.
But I think that what's brilliant about the way she implies it is it can read both. It can read both ways equally. Yeah. And to one extent, their huge connection is an intellectual one.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's threatened by similarly intellectual connection between Braun and Keats. And so it's a deeply layered film.
Oh yeah.
While also being just the most emotional thing I've ever seen in my entire life.
I know. When she breaks down in front of the stairs, I am just so gone. It's unreal. It really is.
It's so good. I don't know how she got to that place as an actress, but I'm glad that she did. It's so intense.
It was funny.
Again,
watching this, I was wondering why I'm not. It's not a movie that I can quote chapter and verse by a long stretch. And while I do have like a weird recall for imagery. So I'm like, why do I know this shot? Why do I know this shot? Why do I know this shot? I'm like, Mariah has used this as a banner over the year. I'm like, this was from Mariah's Avatar when I first met her. I'm like, just all these shots in this movie. I'm like, Marya Gates it's probably still your banner, right?
It's been my banner on Tumblr since I saw this movie.
There we go.
In 2010. So it's been there for 12 years.
I'm like, why do I have a recall for this movie that I've seen 3 times? Yeah. I'm like, it's Marya Gates influence.
It's one of those movies I'm very proud that dozens of people, when they see any image from it, they're like, I gotta tell Mariah that I saw a shot from this on someone else's Twitter. It's like, great.
Yeah, I even thought of Malik a little bit because the way it plays with certain shots and the feelings and the memories you have of falling in love, or when you lose it, just felt so real to me throughout every single frame of this movie.
I unfortunately saw this movie in the throes of breaking up with the first person I was ever in love with. So I was in a really dark place and I was like, damn it, why is this exactly right? Like it had the whole feeling of it. The part where they're exchanging letters because he's gone off and she's like, when I don't hear from it, it feels like I've died. Like, dang.
No kidding, right?
It's right. Like, yes, that is right. That is how it feels. There's an emptiness and then a connection. And I don't know how she did this. It's brilliant.
Yeah. And like we mentioned earlier, it's incredibly erotic without having sex scenes,
Yes.
And just the way two people look at one another and yet it never sort of becomes, maudlin or sentimental in ways that you'd think like a conventional sort of love story would be. It's just the right balance of everything for me. I mean, like he even says at one point, well, if poetry does not come as naturally as leaves to a tree, then it better not come at all. And then she gives Keats that pillowcase embroidered with an image of a tree. And I'm just like, I'm gone. I just like little touches like that just work wonders for me watching this. It's like, I can't wait to watch this again, to be honest.
I have seen this movie probably 100 times over the last 10 plus years. There was a time when I first bought the DVD, I think I watched it 3 times a week for like 3 or 4 months.
Are you happy that it wasn't a tape that you could wear out?
Yeah, pretty much. Like, but it hasn't been released on Blu-ray in the US, and I'm like, my DVD is gonna die at some point. Someone needs to fix this. It's just what I think is wonderful about it is that it feels like a poem. Yeah. It hits you like a poem. It rises and falls like a poem, and it I don't know how she did that. we talk about poetic cinema a lot. And I think Malik is one that people think about a lot as someone who's also kind of achieved that feeling often in his films, but sure. It's difficult. And he doesn't she doesn't rely as much on voiceover as he does to achieve that. It's because the few voiceover moments that are in it are their actual words.
Her camera is underrated. That's one of the things I've been I started to think about this after Power of the Dog, and I really, really got to thinking about this after watching all these movies in a string. Is my God, that woman can shoot the shit out of anything she wants to, and her visual language is just off the bloody chart.
Yeah, and the guy who shot this one, it was only his, I think, a third feature.
Greg Fraser.
Which is crazy.
who has also done his third feature. He's done some incredible stuff too. Like he did Zero Dark 30. He did Killing Them Softly, which is not a great movie, but is shot really well.
Oh yeah, that is shot well.
He did Lion. He did Rogue One, which is a good movie and shot really, really well. He did Dune. He just shot Dune.
Oh my God. Well, yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I just could do a whole 2 hours on this movie. But yeah, we're going to end it with The Power of the Dog. And again, I talked about this one a lot in the last year-end episode, so I don't want to repeat myself too much, but it's a welcome return to cinema for Campion. And I don't want to wait another 12 years, hopefully, for another Campion movie.
Hopefully she can get budget again. Like, just give her some money. It's fine. She's good.
I really like what you said, Mariah, in your review about Kirsten Dunst's character as folding inward rather than exploding outwardly. Because honestly, I was a little surprised that her character's more in the background, because that's not what I expect when I see a Jane Campion movie.
Yeah, and what's interesting that she was drawn to this movie in the book, because Rose in the book is barely there, and I think she fleshed out the scenes with her a lot more.
Sure.
And what's interesting for me, especially if you, like Ryan just did, watch almost all the movies, is she usually completely focuses on the female character and the violence of men. And I think this is the first time where she kind of flips that, because she's done that, right? She's established that. And now she's really hyper focusing on these men and how they create these situations that cause women to fold in on themselves. That it's time, I guess, finally to explore the cause and not just the effect.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to look at it for sure. And I think my favorite shot of 2021 is when the camera pulls back to show George and Rose surrounded by, those mountains and the prairie. Like, I'm beyond moved by that moment.
Her adaptation of this book is like off the chart. I read it last week. Thank you, Netflix, by the way, for that. And for the paper flower that I got with the book.
Cool.
Yeah. It's the first time I've ever got the souvenir that I've talked about on my podcast.
That's great.
She brings out just so much more subtext that from the book. The book is very economical. It's not very long. It's one of those kinds of it's that kind of writing that it leaves a lot for you to kind of glean on your own, and she does. Like specifically the whole homosexual subtext is really tamped down. Really, really tamped down. But beyond that, just the nature of Phil being a really intelligent person, the kind of person that can really get under your craw, because it's not just that they're an asshole, it's that they're a smart asshole. So they'll find a way. And they talk about how when they were in university, like the dean called Phil into his office to do George's work for him because he was like falling so far behind. And it's like, how do you portray this? So seeing Campion like craft this character with Cumberbatch and shape it this way. It's like, this is the story we're going to tell about this person. We need to be really specific, because if we don't hit this bullseye, we're going to miss by a mile.
I also do think, I know I read a few reviews, not necessarily from critics, but for people who viewed it and then wrote about it on social, who dismissed the portrayal of Phil as not accurate to the West and to and as a overly subverted version of a cowboy, right? And I was like, most of the ones that I saw this from were from people who were never lived in the West.
Right.
And I grew up in a cow town, and I grew up with gentleman ranchers. And this is one of the few movies I've ever seen where I'm like, this guy really reminds me of the kind of gentleman ranchers who have their kids learn to play the violin and have like weird little teacup dogs, but can also like wrestle a cow down to the ground and cut off its testicles, you know, like they can do both.
Yeah.
And that's why I do think that casting an English actor who is trained in those, trained to be refined like that, but is also a bit rough and tumble. I think it's a really interesting casting, and I think it works really well. Whereas I don't know that if you didn't have like a classically trained actor, I don't know that they could hit that refinement underneath all the rough and tumble the way that Cumberbatch does.
Yeah, he commits so much to this character in ways that are, and I don't get the criticism that he was miscast, honestly, at all.
No.
It doesn't fit for me. I think it's a perfect casting.
Yeah,
I think the other thing I loved, the other thing that was, by the way, you can tell your old English teacher that they were totally right about this book and this author. This is Mariah. The other thing I loved about getting a chance with the book and coming back to the movie is looking at the structure of the end of it and how quick and how quickly things happen, because I know that that's one of the things that jars a lot of people of watching this movie is,
oh, for sure,
he's he's gone. And literally in the book, it's one page. He's there, he's gone. And they don't actually even give you the early clue that they do. The movie actually does you the favor of planting the seeds early.
Okay.
Oh yeah. They like of mentioning the ultimate device. I don't know why we're skirting it now, but mentioning the ultimate device and saying what kind of boy would I be if I didn't look out for my mother? Like putting those at the beginning, that ain't in the book. You know
what's great about the way she teases it is I'm sure if my dad watches this movie, he'll the minute that they show him poking that dead cow, he's going to be like, oh, I know what's happening. Yeah. Whereas I never do. No, I never catch it. And when it ended the way it ended, I was like, oh, that's why he was poking the dead cow. Like,
the early,
yeah, so good.
I do know the early clue in the book is why don't you wear gloves? The early clue that's in the first like 2 pages. They talk about how Phil talks about how when he sees the other ranchers looking at the Sears catalog about gloves, he's like, you're looking at the gloves again, huh? And he doesn't wear. They make us an early point that he doesn't wear gloves for anything. And if you watch the movie, he never wears gloves. They do bring it up late. They bring it up when they're castrating the bulls.
Oh,
like, why don't you wear the gloves for the castration? He's like, don't eat them. But that's the early clue they use there instead of specifically pointing out, hey, don't touch that cow because
yeah.
No, this movie's another masterpiece. Like, she can clearly take 10 years off and still crank out masterpieces. Just give her all of the monies. And let her do her thing.
You know what's wonderful? She said so it might actually be 10 years because she said the next thing.
What are you doing? Why?
I know. She said the next thing she's doing is setting up a film school in New Zealand that's going to be completely paid for, and I think only take women because she wants to train the next generation.
Well, great, but I mean, hire assistants. Give her all the monies. I mean, for that too. Yeah, but
I will say she is 67. So, I think she's looking towards what can she do for the future training a bunch of up and coming women. And I mean, it's kind of the way that certain other filmmakers came up, like Bogdanovich came up under Ford and things like that. Like, although Ford, I don't think intended to do that. It just happened. But, I think she sees that it's important, and I think she sees her place as an important female filmmaker. And again, a lot of the women I interview, half of them don't like being called female filmmakers, and half of them understand that as a woman, they have had to do more. They've had to push more. And one of the things and I get the women who don't want to be singled out. They shouldn't have to be. No. I get that. But I think one of the things that Campion really understands is that she's an anomaly and she had to be the best in order to have this career, And I think I really like that she sees her importance and she sees that she can help bring more women forward. And I hope that, we get a whole slew of Campions out of Campion Film School,
that would be so wonderful. Yeah.
I mean, and I say it selfishly just because of how, like, as I said, watching these all in a cluster, I'm like this is an absolute master at her craft. The world is lesser that we don't have double this much. We're now, whatever we are, 33 years into her career. That's my regret is there should be at least, like, she's got 8 features. She should have at least 20 at this stage. I really, and just knowing how many more tools are at her disposal, both in terms of capture and in terms of distribution, I'm like, I absolutely want more. But all the same, like, if what you're saying is true, and there's no reason to doubt it, of course, I absolutely love and respect that, because I also believe in walking away at a certain point and either giving back in another way, but just not working until you die. Because just so many filmmakers, so many artists, and just in general, just seem to think that just there is nothing but time on their hands, and they're just going to keep out cranking the work. It's like, at a certain point, I want you as an artist to enjoy your life. Enjoy your children, enjoy your partner, you've given me enough. I don't need more.
Well, she did that after Bright Star, right? I mean, she took that long break to basically be a mom.
And
then she made Top of the Lake, which I want to revisit. I certainly loved I didn't see the second season yet either.
I didn't see the second season either. I completely missed it. It's when I didn't have television, and it hasn't, as far as I know, shown up on streaming. So it's like, if you missed it, you missed it. Like, no.
Yeah, but no, I mean, this has been an amazing conversation. I can't thank you both enough. And then, like I said, Jane Campion's become in my top 5. I think the other director I think of is Kelly Reichardt, who I look forward to every single film that she does from here on out. And I always get excited because she's going to work likely with someone like Michelle Williams. And ever since I saw Wendy and Lucy, that's another director I'm like, I am following this career no matter what.
Yeah, Kelly Reichardt really has a unique voice, and she hasn't compromised, and I love that. She can get budgets now too, and still not like she convinced someone to let her make a movie about a guy who steals milk to make biscuits. It's amazing. I mean, obviously there's more to it than that, but like, on paper, how did she pitch that? I don't know. Someone saw it.
What's the movie called? First Cow. What it's about?
Cow.
Well,
it's about the first cow. and biscuits. It's great.
Yeah, and her next movie, I think, is coming out this year, and it has Michelle Williams. So
yeah, she's reteaming with Michelle Williams, one of the great director-actor pairings of all time.
Muse.
Totally. Mm-hmm. So we end the show with picking our top 3 favorites by this director, and it's kind of hard. It always is. It always is.
Man.
But mine aren't going to likely change anytime soon. So I think I'll go first and just say number 3 is The Power of the Dog. Number 2 is The Piano. And number 1 is Bright Star.
Oh, this is hard.
Well, you can have Ryan go first.
Yeah, I honestly, I think it would be The Piano and The Cut, Bright Star for me. Be those 3.
Yeah.
Bright Star being the number 1.
I'll go. Yeah, this is hard. This is why I want more movies, because I want more options and not have to choose. But like, it's like which ones? Like, they're all amazing.
They are.
I will go with. I'm going to anger you both, but I'm going to go with Bright Star at 3, The Piano at 2, and Power of the Dog at 1. And
no, that doesn't anger me at all.
And all very close. Like, they're all it's 1A, 1B, and 1C, just depending on my mood.
Oh, exactly. It's one of those cases where the movie I'm watching in the moment might be my favorite.
Yeah.
And that happens to me with Paul Thomas Anderson and David Lynch too. Sometimes
with David Lynch, it's like whatever one I just watched last. But if you had to hold a gun to my head and tell me I could only have one, it would be The Elephant Man, which pains me, but I just love The Elephant Man so much. And same with Campion. Like, if you said I could only keep one, I would keep Bright Star, but then I would cry.
Sure. I understand that completely. Thank you so much for being on the show today. It was such a delight to talk with you, and 2 people whose work I enjoy and look forward to, and will continue to support in every way possible. Marya, where can people find you? Obviously, I'm going to link to your link tree because I know you're everywhere.
Yeah, I have. I think I've mostly been writing for RogerEbert.com, the playlist,
Yay.
and Crooked Marquee the most in the last few months. And that's who I have assignments with for the next few months. So those
Sweet.
are my three main outlets. And then I'm just sort of everywhere under Old Films Flickr. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Tumblr still. I love Tumblr. Letterboxd. I just really started getting into Letterboxd last summer because they paid me to write a piece that I'd been pitching around for like months, and someone loved it. So I figured, I should probably use this website. So it's actually, I actually really like it. I don't know what took me so long. I think I didn't like the color of the background of the website. I'm a very aesthetic kind of person. But in terms of as a social platform for movie lovers, it really is the best. I don't know. I was just very reticent to use it for far too long for stupid reasons. So
same for you, Ryan. Plug away.
Mostly been podcasting these days. I'm hoping now that a few more life things are settled that I can get back into the rhythm of writing. But the podcast is the Matinee.Ca, which you can find everywhere that you find your podcasts. Apple, Google, Spotify, Pocket Cast, what have you. I always say to people, if they don't have my show on their platform, just let me know and I'll put it there. If you like me and Marya talking together, boy, have I got a show for you, because we talk at least once or twice a year. And Marya is actually on tap to do my Oscar episode for this year, which will be coming, depending on the time this episode drops, will either have just happened or just be coming up very shortly. But looking forward to 22 because there's all kinds of cool movies coming out that I can't wait to talk about. And it's been fun doing it for as long as I've been able to do it.
Yeah, I got a notification on Facebook that it's been 12 years. It was either today or yesterday since the first Matinee Cast together dropped.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, I instantly aged so much getting that notification.
I am a senior citizen in the podcasting realm.
We have been, how many lives have we led in those 12 years? So many.
No kidding, man.
Yeah, it's been a wild couple of years for sure, but also just the past 11 years I've been doing this show. It's like, there's been some ups and downs and some real roller coaster rides to where I'm like, I think I need to take a break and have other people host it, and then I came back and I felt reinvigorated to keep going. And I'm really looking forward to this year because there will be a wonderful change coming up as of the summer that I'm really excited about that I won't spoil yet. But as for everyone else, the next few weeks, I'm going to be binging on movies from the year 1992 because my friends and Chicago film critics Eric Childress and Colin Suter are returning for their yearly tradition of going back 30 years to cover an entire movie year in roughly 6 hours or so of podcasting, which is crazy. I don't know how we do it, but we do it, and people seem to really love when we do this. So we're going to keep doing it. It's the 1992 retrospective special that's going to be coming up towards the end of February. So no director-centric episode next month, but you're in for a treat. I guarantee it. Until then, please visit directorsclubpodcast.com, send me an email at directorsclubpodcast@gmail.com, and visit nowplayingnetwork.net to hear a lot of great podcasts. Oh my. Thank you so much, Marya and Ryan, for being on the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Yay. We'll see you next month, everyone. Stay safe, and thanks for listening.
Yay.